in a position of strength during this period of rivalry between the U.S. and another nation around the world.
What are some of those? I understand the role of the Treasury Department versus the Fed, but what are the most important steps that the Fed can take to reinforce confidence in the U.S. dollar?
Deliver stable prices, Senator. Deliver an economy that improves from here even further, where real take-home pay moves up, where inflation falls, and the U.S. economic growth potential is the best in the world. I mentioned earlier, Senator, something that I really do believe. AI is a testament to American ingenuity. The United States is the best positioned country in the world to take advantage of it so that the U.S. economy, U.S. workers benefit from it. That the U.S. is in a better position than anyone else, but it's filled with challenges, geopolitical challenges, technology challenges. So the sooner that we can hit the ground running on reform agenda, the better.
You wrote in an op-ed in 2021 in the Wall Street Journal that I recommend everyone reads. It's one of the reasons that I wholeheartedly support you, because of what it says a lot about you in this op-ed. But you talked about how the PRC is actively promoting its digital yuan currency with the explicit goal of creating an alternative payment system that sidesteps U.S. sanctions. You've been very clear that China is not playing by the rules. China is buying over 80% of Iran's sanctioned oil in Chinese currency through Chinese banks, completely outside SWIFT. The Iranian government says it is charging ships to transit the Strait of Hormuz and collects payments via crypto and Chinese currency. What tools does the Federal Reserve have to defend the dollar's role as countries route payments through the Chinese financial systems to do business with Iran and other adversaries?
Yeah, Senator, thank you. As we talked about before, monetary policy is independent. But outside of monetary policy, the Federal Reserve can be working hand in hand with the rest of the government. The Federal Reserve is independent inside of government, not independent of government. What the U.S. can do with respect to the dollar is have a more robust payment system. The Fed has a number of payment systems that most financial participants in the world use. I would say they all are in need of substantial reform. There's a system called Fed Now, which some describe as Fed yesterday. There's a series of new technologies that the Fed needs to oversee and needs to architect so that the payment system in the U.S. is the safest, most efficient, most capable in the world. Otherwise, we'll be losing to adversaries around the world in being the linchpin of the global economy.
Thank you. Your leadership is so important, and it's important right now. We need you on the job right now, not later, right now. So I look forward to voting for you quickly and seeing you confirmed and getting you on the job. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, sir. Senator Blunt Rochester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Warren. Also, thank you, Mr. Warsh, for taking the time also to meet with me earlier this week. I share many of the concerns of different committee members about us kind of putting the cart before the horse. And in one regard, it is the whole issue of independence of the Fed. And I know you have made commitments both in your testimony and here today with us in the process of watching the president try to fire Chairman Powell as well as Governor Lisa Cook. It really raises a lot of red flags for us. Even Justice Kavanaugh said that no president has fired a sitting governor in the 112-year history of the Fed, which was structured to be independent of day-to-day politics, and that it would weaken, if not shatter, the independence of the Federal Reserve. There are a lot of questions here today as well about both ethics and whether or not all the paperwork is in, and even Senator Warren's question about, selling of the assets and whether they will be transparent is something that's important, again, to ensure confidence. And so I shared some of those concerns with you in person when we met, and I share them here for the record. I did have a question. I want to focus on AI, but I did have a question beforehand that I wanted to clarify. You mentioned your desire for reform as well as regime change at the Fed. Could you just clarify, you didn't mean removing the regional bank presidents whose 5-year terms were just restated and re-upped in December. Correct?
Senator, I meant policy regime change.
All right, got it. So for the record, we're not looking at regime change for those 12 board presidents. I want to jump to AI because it's probably one of the #1 issues that I hear about in my state. I'm former Secretary of Labor in Delaware. This is something that I asked Chair Powell when he was here as well about. A lot has happened in a year. And one of the things you have characterized this as the most productivity enhancing wave of our lifetimes, past, present, and future. You have described it as structurally disinflationary, and that central bankers must make a bet. I'm in the camp with Senator Kennedy. I'm concerned about us making a bet on something that we know. You've said it, Chairman Powell said it. We don't have the data to even understand yet. And so my first question is, what happens for policy if that surge doesn't materialize as expected?
Yeah. So Senator, I enjoyed our discussion. I think the essential elements of a new policy for the Federal Reserve is to get access to better data and to dig deeper into the productivity possibilities that can come out of this new investment wave. Today we call it artificial intelligence. 2 years from now, we're going to call it business CapEx, and 3 years from now, we're going to call it just ordinary business. I think it has two important effects on the conduct of policy. I don't claim to have perfect knowledge of how any of these are going to go, but I do have an intuition the pace of change is accelerating. I'm sorry, Senator, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how much of your view on interest rates depends on those productivity gains showing up quickly?
Yeah, so I think it has two elements. One is the increase in capital expenditures to build data centers and the rest. That will have an effect on demand. That will increase demand. My guess is a few tenths of 1%. But on the supply side of the economy, to increase the potential output of the economy, that could be considerably bigger. We don't know that. We can't bank on that. But considerable work needs to be done by the Federal Reserve in evaluating this productivity wave. As I said before, monetary policy works with long and variable lags. So you have to make some informed judgments. And unlike other people in office, if the judgments are wrong, you've got to call the flag on yourself and correct them.
Well, I think there's been a lot of conversation here about concerns that in your record, in your history, you have been hawkish on inflation rates and keeping them low. And now we're looking at AI. What I don't want to see is us use AI as an excuse
Yes.
for making good policy. Too much depends on it. Too many families' lives depend on it. And in our conversation, I also talked about the fact that I know Wall Street is going to be okay, but who we're concerned about as well is Main Street.
Yeah.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Kramer, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Warsh, for being here. Thanks for stepping in the gap.
Thank you.
In fact, I'm a little bit curious as to why you even want to do this. I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, congratulations on the choice. By the way, with regard to independence, real quickly, I find it curious. In fact, I've often found curious that people expect somebody who's appointed by an elected official has to be confirmed by 100 other elected officials would somehow not have a philosophy. That's what I hear sometimes. Like, why don't we, speaking of AI, we should just have an AI Fed chairman. That way it'd be completely neutral, right? Other than the people that put all the information in the algorithms. Anyway, that said, I think we should not forget that it would be common for a president who believes that interest rates should be lower to want to nominate somebody who has expressed that maybe interest rates could be a little lower, as opposed to the quid pro quo that's being accused of today. So I'm just grateful you're willing to do it. By the way, the other thing about independence that strikes me with regard to the Fed, do you have any idea how often an interest rate decision by the Fed is a 12-0 or a 10-0 vote? Do you have a sense of it?
I do, Senator. I'd say over the last 15 years, decisions have been unanimous or near unanimous. As I said to one of your colleagues earlier, I prefer clean memos and messier meetings, and there's nothing wrong with the divergence of opinion. These are very hard calls.
Thank you. I don't know when diversity became a bad thing in a room of thinkers, particularly with staggered terms. The other thing, none of this was in my mind that long ago, but the other thing that strikes me is you do have a lot of experience. This is your 20th anniversary, or at least your second anniversary. Have your thoughts changed much or evolved over those 20 years of experience in various categories, areas, not to mention your research and your intellectual and academic writings? I mean, have you evolved a little bit?
Absolutely. I'll make 3 points if I can. One is it is essential for the chair of this organization to be open-minded to new ideas. The world is moving fast. The mistake that's common in the economics profession, which Secretary Schultz once described to me when I was telling him that I was thinking about pursuing further studies, he said, it's fine to get a PhD, but make sure that's not the last day you were learning. Too many people in the profession go back to what they learned 30 or 40 years ago. We've got to be open-minded. The world's changing and the facts are changing. To the characterization I heard from some of your colleagues about did my opinions change? My opinions change when the facts change. When interest rates are at zero and the balance sheet is growing and the economy is booming, well, relative to that, I will say I sounded hawkish. In 2018, when the Federal Reserve pushed to raise rates into a financial market meltdown and economic weakening, I said that was a mistake. That was dovish. I expect to have a divergence of views based on the facts on the ground. And if I could just answer one other question you asked about why I want to do this job, I would say I've lived the American dream. I've been the luckiest, most blessed, fortunate person with the greatest teachers. I was a kid from upstate New York in public schools, and I had an opportunity to serve after 9/11. I was walking with a friend of mine who happens to be in this room away from a building near the site of the tragedy. I was walking up Fifth Avenue, and I thought to myself, what am I doing? And so I committed myself to public service then. I did 10 and a half years of public service. I've been grateful for 15 years in the private sector where I've been able to practice my discipline, think anew about things. And the call to service struck again. I'm honored to serve if this body will confirm me.
Excellent. You know, I do find it curious that so many people seem to be hung up on the fact that you've been successful even while doing in between bouts of public service, probably a better way to put it. I'm not wealthy, never have been wealthy, and I'm not sure I have much potential to be wealthy, but I have nothing against people who are. That said, real quickly, I do want to talk a little bit about debanking. That has been talked about a whole lot, but speaking of institutions that are dug in, I think there's out of the 22,000 people, there are a lot of them that sort of still believe that reputational risk should be a factor, that reputational risk could be based on out of favor, industries. Can you give me a sense of how you plan to attack that, if you will?
Politics have no place, not just in monetary policy, but in supervision and regulation.
Yes.
If central bankers should stand for anything, it's to resist fads, resist trends, call balls and strikes. That's exactly what I would intend to do.
I lean hard yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Senator Alsobrooks.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Warsh. And thank you for meeting with me last week. In August of 2025, President Trump tried to fire Fed Governor Lisa Cook for unsubstantiated allegations widely believed to be politically motivated. Thankfully, both a federal district court and the DC Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in favor of Governor Cook, preventing her from being fired while the investigation proceeds. This is a landmark test for independence. Now, Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh said allowing Cook's firing to go forward would weaken, if not shatter, the independence of the Federal Reserve. So I would like to ask you, will you commit to defending Governor Cook's tenure as Chairman Powell has done?
Senator, it was a pleasure to meet you in your office and spend time with you. As I said to you then, I'll repeat here to the broader committee. If I stand for anything, it's the Fed should stay in its lane. As I understand that matter, it's pending before the United States Supreme Court. think it's inappropriate for me to weigh in on that, especially because in the event that I am confirmed, I could be a party to that matter.
Well, I disagree with Mr. Warsh. I disagree with you. This is your future colleague who is confirmed by both this committee and this Senate to serve her country. Chairman Powell has defended her tenure, and your answer to this is you will not defend her. Is that correct?
No, Senator, that's not my answer. My answer is there's a pending case before the Supreme Court, the results of which I think we're going to hear about soon. If confirmed by this body, I will follow the Constitution, the Supreme Court law, and the best of the Fed's tradition.
Well, let me ask you this then. Do you agree or disagree with Justice Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, who said that her firing would weaken, if not shatter, the Fed's independence? Do you agree with Justice Kavanaugh?
So I took a constitutional law class, but I wouldn't say I'm worthy of being a Supreme Court justice. What I can say is Fed independence means everything to me.
And it means,
And that's exactly what I would try to do if I'm confirmed.
well, I'd like to move on to the criminal investigation of Chairman Powell. The Trump administration could have taken many off ramps to end what is a ridiculous exercise. Instead, they have doubled down. U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Janine Pirro, sent prosecutors to the Fed last week to continue this circus, and they were turned away. Chairman Powell has said that the administration's investigation is not about any testimony or the renovations of a building, calling these arguments pretext. And he said that the threat of criminal charges is a consequence of the Federal Reserve setting interest rates based on its best assessment of what will serve the public rather than following the preferences of the president. So do you dispute Chairman Powell's assertion that the investigations are pretext for policy disagreements?
Senator, as I said, with respect to the other case, this is also pending before the courts. I have a ton of confidence in the court's ability to make a final resolution. I'd abide by any judgment of the courts and would follow that judgment and the best of the
Okay,
Fed's
it's
traditions.
difficult. Let me just ask you another question instead. Just a few days ago, bless his heart, President Trump called Chairman Powell a stubborn, incompetent person who he said suffers from Trump derangement syndrome. Now, can you say before this committee that you disagree with this characterization?
Yeah, my disagreements with Chairman Powell are about policy, not about personality or personnel.
Okay, let me ask you another question about the president. Now, my colleague a moment ago said to you that the president, you said the president has never asked you about lowering interest rates, and you said he never specifically, is the word you use, demanded that you decrease interest rates. Well, did the president generally suggest this to you as well?
You know, in my recitation to your colleagues, I wasn't trying to be clever. The president never generally or specifically instructed me, suggested I should commit to any interest rate path whatsoever.
Okay, let me go to another point. So if the Senate does not